Hey, it's ClassCheck here, and I just recently finished watching New Age Gamer's video about the corruption in the King James Bible. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the King James. I think we have much better versions available today, so I'm not really going to defend the King James Bible so much as I am going to examine the methodology in the reasoning that New Age Gamer is using to see if it's sound or not, because he is on YouTube and he's talking about the Trinity, and he's talking about doctrine and who the true church is, and he's examining the early church fathers, and now he's going into textual criticism. And I think it's important to understand if he actually has a concept of what's going on here or not. I'm a father, I have 2 kids, and when my kids were young, I used to play a game with them where I would take my hand and I would stick my thumb in between my fingers like this and gently touch it to their nose and pull my hand back and show them this little thing right here and say, hey, I got your nose, and they would think it was their nose, and then I would gently put it back to their face and touch it to their nose and say, just put your nose back on your face, and they thought that was just great. And but eventually they got older and they got wiser and they learned more, and they learned that it was just my thumb in there. It wasn't actually their nose. And I think what New Age Gamer is doing here is he's inadvertently playing, probably without knowing, playing, hey, I got your nose, talking about some very important issues here, and where there's really no substance to anything that he's saying. So first let me just define a couple of terms really quickly. This is a copy of the NIV Bible. This is what's called a translation. It's not the actual Greek language that was spoken in. Some translators translated that into English. The same could be said for the King James version of the Bible he used. Now, the Diaglott that he used is actually a couple of different things. It has a Greek manuscript in here. These are the Vatican manuscripts. That's the actual Greek words. And then it has a translation along the side in English, and under the Greek it has a word-for-word translation of the Bible. This is an actual Greek Bible. It's a copy of a manuscript. It is the Byzantine family of manuscripts, and it's completely in Greek. There is no English words at all in this, and this is a copy of what's called a manuscript. Okay, now I want you to remember those 2 words, because New Age Gamer brings up 1 Timothy verse 3:16, and in the King James Bible, it is translated, God was manifest in the flesh. That's just a small portion of the text, but it says that God was manifest in the flesh, talking about Jesus Christ. Now, in the NIV, which he read, it says that he, using a pronoun instead of God, appeared in a body. Okay? And then he has this to say about this supposed discrepancy.
Why the 2 differences? Why doesn't it say God was manifested in the flesh? Well, we're going to have to go to the Greek. I'm going to be using my interlinear Bible here. And I'm going to be reading you what it says here in the Greek. It says, in the Diaglott version of the Scriptures, confessing great is the secret of piety. He who was manifested in the flesh was justified in the Spirit, was seen by messengers, was proclaimed among nations, was believed up in the world, was taken up in glory.
Alright, so I want you to notice 2 things that New Age Gamer did. The first thing he did was he said, hey, let's go to the Greek. And he grabbed his Diaglott and he went to the Greek. Well, not exactly. He didn't go to the Greek. We certainly didn't hear him read any Greek or do anything. He went to the word-for-word translation underneath the Greek. So what he actually did was he simply read another translation. He didn't go to the Greek at all. The other thing that he did was right after he made that statement, he mentioned the footnotes in the Diaglott that say, well, some manuscripts say God, while what we think are the best manuscripts have the pronoun he. And while I would agree with that statement that I think that the best manuscripts do testify to he completely misses the point of the difference in the manuscripts. The King James version of the Bible uses a manuscript called the received text. And here's what it looks like in the Greek. You can clearly see that the theos, the God, is in the Greek manuscript that they use to translate their version. Now, here's the version in the Westcott and Hort, which is used for the NIV, and it's also used for the New World Translation. You can see that the pronoun he is in this manuscript. So quite simply, when the King James translators translated that word as God, they were simply translating the word theos from the manuscript. So it actually is a correct translation. Now, the evil Trinitarians who supposedly have this conspiracy to insert, Trinitarian doctrine all over the Bible, notice that in modern translations like the ESV and the NIV, they're going back to what we believe to be better and more well-attested manuscripts, and they actually go back to the pronoun he in that verse. But let's see what New Age Gamer, let's see the conclusion that he draws from his evidence.
So, the King James is guilty of adding the word God into the text. Is that fair to do so? No, it's not.
Now, as I have just clearly demonstrated, the King James translators did not add the word God to the text. The body of manuscripts they were working off of had the word theos in the manuscript, and they translate it properly as God. Now, New Age Gamer may want to, argue whether the Greek text is valid, whether the received text is a valid manuscript or not, but he doesn't seem to understand any of that because he's making a battle with a translation that faithfully translated the word. He even gives us this word of advice.
So, you guys are going to have to do a little bit more research.
Now, of course, I would make the case that it's not us who needs to do a little bit more research. It's New Age Gamer who needs to do a little bit more research. And he also needs to work on his consistency because, of course, as we all know, the New World Translation inserts the word Jehovah over 200 times into the Greek Scriptures, where there is not one single Greek manuscript. Let me say that again, just for emphasis. There is not one single Greek manuscript that contains the divine name, yet they have seen fit to not only put it where the writers were quoting Old Testament passages, they even put it in places where they're not quoting Old Testament passages, and they do so without one single bit of manuscript evidence. So perhaps if he wants to create a battle about who's inserting words into the Scriptures, he may want to knock on the door of the Kingdom Hall and ask them why they're doing that. Thank you for listening. God bless you.
So, you guys are going to have to do a little bit more research.